Good morning. So today we're moving on to Putnam's meaning and reference. And Putnam is dealing with a lot of the same topics we've been looking at in Kripke, but he is expanding the scope and giving a slightly different spin on these questions. So there are really two halves to this lecture. So we have one half today and the other half. Monday is a holiday, right? I hadn't realized when I was setting out the schedule. So there's no lecture on Monday, and we'll have the second half of this when we look at some of the bigger significance of Putnam's thing on Wednesday. Right. So the question Putnam orients everything around is we're looking at the connection between the name and the thing out there. And Putnam's question is there our psychological states that fix the reference of our terms? So what's your feeling at this point? If I just give you that, is it your mind that sets up the connection between the sign and the object? Yes? Put your hand up if you think the answer is yes. And if you think the answer is no? Ah, that's pretty good. That's an even split, I would say. Okay. Any comments? Any strong views?
He has the twin Earth argument.
Okay, what I plan to do today is just go over that quite slowly. Yeah. How many of you have come across twin Earth before? Wow, okay. Well, you're going to do it again. Right. But feel free, if you've done this before and you have some favorite point you want to make about this, then do feel free to raise that. So if you think in terms of, the idea is that what's going on in your brain or what's going on in your mind, that's what sets up the connect between the sign and the object. Now, if you think about things in terms of sense, if grasp of sense is what fixes reference, then sense is something that your mind grasps. If it's a description, then presumably it is, right? It would be this description in your mind that is setting up the connect between the name and the object. If it's a causal chain, is it your mind that is setting up the connect between the name and the object? Well, the causal chain seems like it's something external to your mind. You see what I mean? There is the object, here is your mind, and a causal connect between them isn't something internal to your mind. So it's not your mind that is setting up the connect between the name and the object. It's this causal relation between your mind and the world. That's all right? Okay. So if you have a causal picture of reference, something like that, there's just the sign and the object, seems more plausible. Okay, twin Earth. The idea is, let me just set out what the basic thing is. I just set out this picture where your mind is one thing, and what relation you stand into your surroundings, that's something different. Right? That's very plausible. Yeah? Here is my mind over here. There are you guys out there. You guys can affect what's going on in my mind. But in principle, my mind could be just the way it is, whether there was anybody there or not, whether this was all a dream or this was all a hallucination or anything like that. Your surroundings could cause you to have different psychological states. But your mind is this domain over which you have special knowledge, over which you have special authority. Yeah? I know all about what's going on in here. What's going on out there is something different. So I can know all about what my own thoughts and feelings and so on are without knowing anything about my relations to my surroundings. Yes? I can know all about the mind just by casting my gaze inwards. And if I'm dreaming or if I'm hallucinating, if there's nothing out there, or if there are all the people I think there are out there, or if there's something out there but it's entirely alien, well, that might be all very distressing in various ways, but that's facts about what's out there. These are not facts about what's going on in my mind. Yeah? So you know your own psychological states, whether or not you know about your relations to anything else, whether you know that you're dreaming or whatever. Yeah? When Descartes said maybe it's all a dream, maybe there's an evil genius, all that stuff, he still had knowledge of his own thoughts. He still had knowledge of his own feelings, of what was going on in his mind. So that seems a kind of natural picture of what's going on in your own mind right now, but presumably you also know about what was going on in your mind yesterday. Yep. I mean, so long as you don't forget. You could forget, but how could I put it? You've got a specially direct connect to your own past mental states, to your mental states 20 minutes ago, right? You might forget things, but if you don't forget, then you have authoritative knowledge as to what's going on there. Okay? That's okay? I think in the end, that's the kind of picture of the mind that Putnam doesn't put it like this at all, but Putnam's picture actually blows up. Putnam's points actually blow up that kind of picture of the mind, which is very distressing, but there you go, even though this is so natural. So just to start out on the garden path, here is Earth on the left, and here is your old friend, twin Earth, on the right. As you can see, they are very similar, right? Can you see the similarities there? They look very much alike. There's just one difference we're going to specify, that Earth is made of 2/3 H2O, whereas twin Earth is made of 2/3 XYZ, a different compound. But we'll come to that in a moment. For the moment, superficially, they're exactly the same. Yeah? You take a look at them, you couldn't really tell a difference. So you and your double on Earth are, let's suppose, molecule for molecule identical. So there is this planet far away in a distant galaxy. Yeah? There is an Earth on it, just like this one. An Earth in it, just like this one. California in it. See, this is regular California, right? And here is twin California. So you can see they are very similar. And in twin California, there is a Berkeley just like this one, and a lecture room just like this one, and someone sitting in it just like you, right? And you and this person are very, very similar. Now, suppose you swap you out with your double. Suppose that we have the power to just translate you from the lecture room on Earth to the lecture room in twin Earth, and you double out here. This could be happening to you at various points during your life. Will you realize? How could you, right? What would tip you off? Nothing. Melissa? Nothing could tip you off. So your mental states would be exactly the same. If this is going on, if this is not going on, what's going on in your mind is just the same. Yeah, it doesn't affect what's going on in your mind. Okay, so that's Earth. That's the basic concepts of twin Earth and psychological state. Okay? That's all right? Okay. Well, what's the difference? I said there's X, Y, Z on twin Earth. So here's Putnam. The liquid called water on twin Earth is not H2O, but a different liquid whose chemical formula is very long and complicated. As so often with philosophers, he doesn't really have the technical vocabulary to explain this fully, but we nonetheless abbreviate this as X, Y, Z. So on Earth, we have the evaporation, condensation, precipitation cycle. Yes, don't say you don't learn anything in this class. As you can see, this is for twin Earth, and twin Earth, the cycle is very similar, right? You have this stuff in the rivers and lakes and so on, and it evaporates. Am I getting too technical? It evaporates and then condenses in clouds, and no, wait a minute. Who's it? It goes up into, condenses into clouds, and then it precipitates as rain, right, and fills the river. Yes? Okay, and it's just like that in twin Earth. That's what's going on in twin Earth with the XYZ. Okay? Okay. Some of you look very suspicious. Okay. So XYZ is indistinguishable from water at normal temperatures and pressures. I mean, of course, there are ways in which you can tell that whether you're dealing with XYZ or H2O, but they require very special equipment and hadron colliders and things like that, but you can't really do it in normal circumstances. So the oceans and lakes and seas of twin Earth contain X, Y, Z and not water, and it rains X, Y, Z in twin Earth and not water. And look, I have here something very rare. This is, you don't get these very often because twin Earth is very far away, right? But this is an actual photograph of twin Earth. And as you can see, right, it looks very similar to a terrestrial scene. Yeah, it's startling really. You couldn't tell just by looking. So the picture is on Earth, you have this stuff that is exhibiting this behavior of filling the rivers and lakes, being wet, being liquid at regular temperatures, participating in the evaporation, condensation, precipitation cycle. So it has all these symptoms of being water, right? And there's something that explains why the stuff on Earth displays all these symptoms. What is it that explains why the stuff on Earth behaves like that? Dissolves things. Suppose you're a chemist wondering, I've got this stuff here that dissolves salt and sugar, for example. Why does it do that? Because of its underlying structure. And what is that underlying structure? Class? Very good. Right. Okay, there you go. So it's because you've got the H2O molecule there that you're getting this behavior. So when chemists are trying to figure out what that underlying structure is, I mean, I guess it's trivial now, but around the turn of the last century, it wasn't trivial to find that that underlying structure was H2O. So when you say water is H2O, that's an informative identity, right? You get two names here for the same stuff, and it was serious work to discover that this thing is true. Yeah? So these are two different modes of presentation of the same stuff. Something like that? Yeah. So on Earth, when we learned water was H2O, that was a discovery. We were finding out what the word stood for all along. All along, we had been talking about this stuff. This stuff, we didn't know what the internal structure was, but we were talking about H2O. So in twin Earth, when their chemists at the turn of the last century are figuring out what the internal structure is that causes the stuff to behave like that, it's XYZ. So on twin Earth, they say water is XYZ. Is that an informative identity for them or an uninformative identity? Informative, right. If it's informative for us, it's informative for them. They're just finding out what the word stood for all along. Okay? Now, let's look at this in terms of possible worlds. Putnam puts it like this. For every world and for every everything in for every world, for anything in that world, X in that world is water. If and only if X bears same L to the relation to the entity referred to as this in W. So let's. These are two different ways we could think of the reference of water. You could say, well, water is kind of a local term. For any world, there's something people are calling water in that world, and that'll be the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes and so on, and that's water there. So over on twin Earth, is what they have water? Is what they have in twin Earth water? I don't think it is, because water is H2O, right? But according to this definition, it would be, yeah, because that's the stuff they refer to. Yep.
So what does the subscript L mean?
Same liquid. It's the same liquid. That too is a very technical scientific notion, but we'll take it that we know what it means, right? Same liquid. Right. So by this definition, what they have in twin Earth would count as water. Yeah, but that's the wrong answer. So Putnam says, no, the way it goes is, for every world W, for every X and W, X is water if and only if X bears is the same liquid as the entity referred to as this in the actual world. So here is the actual world, right? So in any other possible world, when we talk about water in that world, when we say if water had been rarer, if there had been water on the moon, if there hadn't been any water on Earth, when we're talking about different counterfactual scenarios using water, we're talking about whatever in that world is the same liquid as the stuff that is falling from the skies and so on in the actual world. Yeah. So whenever you, in any possible world, whenever we're talking about in any counterfactual scenario, what we're talking about when we talk about water in that scenario, to find what water refers to in that scenario, we have to go back to the actual world and see if what we're talking about here is the same liquid as the stuff that is falling from the rivers and so on in this world. Is that okay? So is water a rigid designator in this definition or a flexible designator? It's rigid. Why is it rigid?
Because water is only referring to what water means in that world, not necessarily in that world.
So that sounded right, but say it again.
Water refers to what it means in the actual world rather than the twin world.
Yeah.
We're using our spelling.
Okay, let me spell that out a little bit. If I want to know what water refers to in this world, I have to trek back to this world and see what stuff is falling from the skies in this world, and then say, is that stuff here?
Same,
Yeah, the same liquid, yeah. So when I want to find out what water refers to in this world, I have to trek back to the actual world and see what stuff is falling from the skies and so on in this world, and then trek back to this world, yeah? So am I going to get water coming out as referring to the same thing in every world? Yes, because you're doing the same thing all the time. You're just trudging back to the actual world, seeing what's falling from the rivers and lakes here, and then trudging back here. Yeah, so in every possible world, water is referring to the same thing, the same stuff. Yeah, so it's a rigid designator. So is it necessary that water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the skies, and quenches thirsts, and so on? Put your hand up if you think the answer is yes. 1, 2, and if you think the answer is no, okay, the no's have it. Anybody wish to explain why? Either no or yes. Yep.
It just has to be H2O. It doesn't have to play like the same function or like XYZ does on another planet because it designates rigidly if it's not H2O, that it's not water, even if it plays all these same functions.
If it's not H2O, it's not water, even if it fills all these same functions. Right. So, yeah, I mean, there could be ringers for water, right? So this is an Earth scenario, and this is a twin Earth scenario, yeah? So in the twin Earth scenario is XYZ that is doing that, but XYZ isn't water, yeah? So maybe in twin Earth there is some water, but it's very rare. It's kept in laboratory conditions only, yeah? It doesn't fill the rivers and lakes and so on. So it can be necessary, the water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes and falls from the sky and so on. Because there could be another world in which some different stuff is the stuff that's falling from the lakes and falling from the sky and so on. And in that world, water might be doing something different. Yeah? So it's not necessary, it's contingent that water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes. It's true in some possible worlds, but not in others. Yep.
Yeah, so all the descriptions that are being used here, fills rivers and lakes, falls from the sky and so forth, it might just seem like they don't uniquely pick out H2O, so to speak.
They don't uniquely pick it out. Well, yeah.
Yeah, because you could, you know, if the planet were colder or something like that,
Yep.
maybe methane would, you know, fulfill all of these
Yep.
sorts of things.
Yep. Yes, right.
But it just seems like at a certain level of description, we would be able to pick out between XYZ and H2O, right? And that seems to be what's described in the case, right? That on the twin Earth, they're able to figure out like this stuff that we have here that falls from the sky
Yeah.
is not in fact H2O, right? We've got
They know they can figure out it's not H2O,
right,
sure.
They can figure all that out. So I guess I'm just worried that so is the reason that this isn't necessary just the fact that the level of description we have doesn't uniquely pick out H2O?
Well, there's a sense in which it does uniquely pick it out and a sense in which it doesn't. In the actual world, it does uniquely pick out H2O. There's only one stuff that is doing all this evaporation process and so on, yeah. So in that sense, it does uniquely pick it out, yeah. The sense you mean in which it doesn't uniquely pick it out is that in a different possible world, there are different scenarios in which that description is picking out something different, yeah. Yeah. Yep.
But if it's twin Earth, doesn't it have to follow the same, I don't know, the same environmental functions have to apply, in one have to apply to the second? So by method of induction, you can say that, for instance, if water doesn't, occur in this, if the process of water doesn't occur in this form, as it occurs in the first world, then it can't be the case that it is water. Because you're saying that, it doesn't necessarily have to follow that water fulfills or that fills rivers and lakes.
It's not necessarily that water fills the rivers and lakes, right? That's what I was saying about this.
So it just has to be the case that it has the same molecular structure. That's all.
That's right, yeah. Well, that's what Putnam is saying at any rate. I don't want to seem too dogmatic about this, but Putnam's idea is W1 here, he means the same thing as I mean A, right? The actual world. So water has got to be the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes and so on in the actual world, yeah? But in other possible worlds, it can get up to all sorts of things, yeah? Different things. Is that okay? Yeah, yeah, okay. Yep.
I have a clarifying question. I've never understood why, so if we have two substances, one is XYZ and one is H2O, and both substances exhibit exactly the same properties.
That's right.
Why is it the case that we wouldn't then begin to suspect that it's being H2O or it's being XYZ isn't fully explanatory of
Its behavior.
So the reason that we want to say like it's necessary that water is H2O is that H2O is explanatory of the substance, right?
Very good.
So we have these two substances, and XYZ and H2O both explain the substance.
That's right. The H2O explains this behavior, XYZ explains this behavior. Yep.
But now we have a case where XYZ and H2O seem to explain.
The same phenomena.
Yeah.
Yeah. But couldn't that be? I mean, you could have two different people who behave in exactly the same way, if you see what I mean. Why can't you have two different substances? I mean, of course you might argue the differences between them must show up somewhere. Yeah. But what I meant by saying it only shows up in laboratory conditions was that difference only shows up in ways that don't at all impact on the psychology of a regular person. Yeah. So within the parameters of ordinary life, these two substances behave exactly the same way. But it could be that there are just two different mechanisms at work here. Yeah. I mean, if you get a nasty cough, there are lots of different reasons that might be happening. Yeah, that's just a familiar phenomenon, no? Yeah. Yeah, come back to that if you want. I mean, if some other spin on it occurs. Yeah. Yeah.
H2O is a rigid designator in any problem in the world.
Yeah, H2O is a rigid designator too. Yeah.
So it's identical in any possible world.
It's always picking out the same thing.
What
Yeah.
if I take H2O? I've got two glasses, one on twin Earth and one on Earth. I'm saying they're indexing. If this H2O in this glass and the H2O in this glass, they're different bits of H2O, or quantum physics is in trouble. You know what I mean? In other words, we've got particles of H2O here and particles there, and there's no way they can be identical because.
That's right. They're not. Well, they're not both H2O.
What is Putnam going to do with that?
Well, the stuff in twin Earth. I mean, here we've got a whole lake of the stuff, right? So the stuff in twin Earth is XYZ. It's just not H2O. That's just the description of the case. Yeah. It looks like H2O. Sure. I mean, it's very, very similar, but it's not H2O.
That makes it type identity.
Well, it's the same stuff. I mean, it's different stuff. Yeah, it's behaving in a similar way, looks similar, but it's a different stuff. Okay. Okay. So, class, is it necessary that water is H2O?
Yes.
Yes. Anyone want to argue the other way? Okay, right. It's necessary that water is H2O. And I mean, as someone said, there's a kind of strong intuition here that this is necessary, because there's some sense in which H2O is the essence of water. When people talk about essences, they mean the fundamental explanatory thing that makes it behave the way it does. Okay, but is it a priori that water fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the skies, quenches thirst, and so on? Is that a priori? Put your hand up if the answer is yes. If the answer is no, well, I wish to disagree. Right, so, I mean, is it a priori that water fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the sky, quenches thirst, and so on? Well, how would you find out that water fills the rivers and lakes and sort of participates in that cycle and so on? Who told you that? I mean, how did you discover that? Did scientists have to work on this to find out that's that stuff out there right now? That's water, boy. You got a prize, yeah.
You have to look out the window, though, don't you, to see that it rains?
You have to look out the window to see that there is such a stuff, right? But how would you know that there was water existed at all, unless you knew that this kind of thing was going on? Suppose you have a child that doesn't understand the meaning of the word water, right? That's all right? Here is your task. How are you to explain to the child what water is? Give it a glass of water. Yeah, expose it to some water, right? And you would say, look, this stuff here, this glass, this is not unusual, right? Look up there, that's water. Yeah? The stuff in the rivers and streams, that's water. Yes? That's how you would explain to a child what the word water means. Yeah? You would show how water is behaving. That's the only way you have of explaining what the word water means. And once you know that, you know that water is filling the rivers and lakes, falling from the sky, quenching thirst, and so on. Yep? Yep?
But you don't necessarily know that it does all of those things, right? I mean, you could show them a glass of water, and then it would be informative to them to find out, oh, the stuff in that glass is the same as the stuff.
That's true. It's a little bit like clusters of descriptions, right? Any one of them could go. Yeah, you might find out there are some rivers and lakes where there isn't any water, for example. Or that might turn out not to be in a glass of water, right? So any one thing could go. But the general picture of what water is, that must be right. Otherwise, there's no such thing as water. Yep?
You can't say that, because all you're doing is describing XYZ.
I would give the same... I agree. Someone in Twin Earth would give the same explanation of what they mean by the word water. That's right. So...
How can they be different?
How can they be? No, this is absolutely on point. How could they be different? Well, we're in different planets, right?
What's different about that?
Okay, well, this is why I take it slowly. Right? We need to have all the bits and pieces firmly in place, right? What's different about them is just what's filling the rivers and lakes, which chemical substance it is. Okay, so they're talking about XYZ. Did they but know it? We are talking about H2O, did we but know it? But they're talking about the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes, as they put it. We are talking about the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes. We're both right about that. Yeah?
Yeah.
And we're both a priori right. Yes?
So are you saying this is a priori, just like Bright, the inventor of the wheel, a priori? Or
As what, sorry?
as when you said Bright, the inventor of the wheel?
Yeah, that's right. It's very good. Yeah, it's exactly like Brighton, the inventor of the wheel. Yeah, that was a priori too. You remember that? Right, Bright is the inventor of the wheel. Was that necessary? No, that was not necessary. Just as this is not necessary. Yeah? But is Bright is the inventor of the wheel a priori? Let me rephrase that. Is it a priori that Bright is the inventor of the wheel? Yes, of course it is, right? I mean, nobody else did it. Yep.
Well, Bright is the inventor of the wheel if you are stipulate that Bright was the inventor of the wheel. But when you discover water, you don't stipulate that water is the stuff that.
You don't stipulate that. Well, I guess what I'm thinking is you do stipulate that. That's the only way you have of explaining what water is the stuff that does this.
But there could, like on Twin Earth, it could be something else.
Right? On Twin Earth, someone else might have invented the wheel.
But on this Earth,
Yep.
the river might be filled with something other than water.
Oh, any particular river, I agree, might be filled with something other than water. You know, that's what these pollution guys are always saying. Look at that. It's mostly mercury. Right? But by and large, it's got to be that's water. Yeah, that's what I meant. We don't have any other fix in what water is, just as we don't have any other fix in who Bright is than as the inventor of the wheel. Yep.
I guess I'm having trouble with this, but even with the notion that Bright is the inventor of the wheel, at first glance, I mean, I don't know who invented the wheel, but at first glance, I thought you were saying that let's just call whoever invented the wheel Bright.
That is what I'm saying. Yeah, let's just call whoever invented the wheel Bright.
So,
Yeah.
So if you're just throwing it out there, like let's just call whomever invented.
That's absolutely what I'm doing. It's not that I have some special insight into, whatever it is, what went on in the time of the cavemen. Yeah, yeah.
So I guess I just can't seem to understand how. I mean, if what you're saying is in all the lakes and rivers and in the skies, like all that stuff that you've seen, that
Right.
is H2O.
I'm saying that is water, right?
Okay.
That's a stipulation.
Right. That's water. I'm just trying to grasp a little bit. So that stuff you've seen, that's water.
Right.
Okay.
No, that's good. Okay. Okay, so yeah, no, that's very good. Just as I just throw it out there, Bright is whoever invented the wheel. So I look at all the stuff out there and I say, well, whatever's doing that, let's call it water. Water. Yep.
So you're saying it's not necessary that water is H2O?
I am saying that. It's not necessary. Because although I just throw it out there that the stuff that is doing all this is water, I also allow, just as I allow Bright in a different world could have done something different, so too I allow water in a different world could have done something different. Something else might have taken over that role. In a different world, something else might have invented the wheel first. In a different world, something else might be filling the rivers and lakes.
I thought water was a rigid designator.
It is a rigid designator. Bright is a rigid designator too.
But
Yeah.
it's necessary that Bright was the inventor of the wheel, right?
Well, Bright could have been crushed at birth. That makes perfect sense, in which case he would never have got around to inventing the wheel. So it's not necessary that Bright invented the wheel. Yes, good, yeah.
It's related to maybe the jargon that we used in section yesterday. So we're using necessary to mean it metaphysically necessary, and then a priori to be epistemically necessary.
Yeah.
Say, like, is it necessary if Bright invented the wheel, then you're being asked, is it metaphysically necessary?
Yeah. Could something different have happened? Yeah. Not for all we know, did someone other than Bright invent the wheel, but just could Bright have done something different? Yeah. And these are different questions. Yeah. Well, okay. One. Yeah. Let's say 1, 2. Yeah.
I think you just lost me a little bit when you were saying that it is not necessary that water is H2O, but then you said...
Oh no, I did say it is necessary that water is H2O.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, did I say that? But did I say?
She said it's not.
Oh.
Yeah. It's not necessary that water is the thing that fills up the river.
That's right.
It's necessary that it's H2O, right? That's what you're trying to say.
God, I'm so sorry. Okay. Right. Okay, let me just. Okay. Did I really do that, Melissa? I really did that. Okay, I am so sorry. Okay. That's really unforgivable. Okay. It was a computer. The computer confused me. Okay. Right. That's what I should have been saying. Okay. Okay.
But, and then you're, sorry,
Okay.
not necessary.
Is it necessary that water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes? No. Whoa, okay. I see that the confusion generated was not yours but mine. Okay, right. Okay, so are we all happy with this? It's not necessary that water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes. And it is necessary that water is H2O. Whatever I said to the contrary. Okay, God. Okay, how long have I been doing this? Is it a priori that water fills the rivers and lakes? Yeah, yeah.
I was just wondering, I think this gets into like a priori for who.
A priori for who, yeah.
Couldn't you like have kind of chemist Mary that's like in a room learning about water,
Okay.
solid chemical structure of water that I've
Right.
never seen,
But you've never seen water, yeah.
functional role that it plays in our everyday life.
Uh-huh.
Well, it wouldn't be a priori for her, and she might know more about water than a lot of us.
That's a great example. Okay, the way I've sketched it out so far is that Mary just has to get the description. It's the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes and so on, yeah. And Mary could get that, and she could get it that that's a priori.
But what if, okay, so suppose she didn't get that description, and she just knew
Oh,
every like chemical behavior,
right. Well, she wouldn't know what water is. She wouldn't understand water the same way we do.
just H2O.
Yeah. Yeah, she just understands
So it'd be
H2O.
like getting just the one mode of presentation.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, but it's an informative identity that water is H2O. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so at some point in the past, we didn't know that water was H2O, right?
That's not, exactly, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so at that time, before we knew that water was H2O necessarily, this statement, so if we replace water with H2O in this statement,
That would be false. I mean, it wouldn't be true that water, that H2, that, sorry, it wouldn't be a priori that
yes, it
H2O.
would be, yes, it would be a posteriori.
Right.
That H2O, but then after we learn the informative identity that water is H2O, this then becomes.
Well, not exactly, because we can derive it from the identity, which is a posteriori, plus this a priori thing, yeah. All right, so far, despite my attempts to baffle and confuse, is that okay? Okay, so here's a way of thinking about what's going on. Usually, when you're thinking about a remark like this, water fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the skies and so on, and you say, is that necessary? You're asking about, keep the actual world fixed and consider what goes on in different possible worlds, right? Keep the actual world fixed, consider what goes on in different possible worlds. And then the puzzle is, how can you know what's going on a priori when you don't know which world you're in, if you see what I mean? Yeah? How can there be a priori contingent truths? Well, the thing about this is, when you learn what water means, you learn this in the same way you learn bright as whoever invented the wheel. What you're learning is that water is whatever it is that in the actual world fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the sky, and so on, right? So suppose the actual world were not this one, but a different one. Would it be true in the actual world then that water is what fills the rivers and lakes and so on? Yes, because remember Putnam's definition. Water is whatever is referred to as this in the actual world, right? So whatever world is actual, water is the stuff that in the actual world fills the rivers and lakes and so on. Yeah? So even if we switch around which world is actual, even if we switch the A to a world where what's dominantly filling the rivers and lakes and so on is X, Y, Z, it would still be true in the actual world then that water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes and falls from the sky and so on. Yeah? So if we move the A there, it's still true in the actual world that water fills the rivers and lakes, falls from the sky, is conscious first and so on. There will still be a world in which it's not true that water is what's filling the rivers and lakes and so on. Because if this is the XYZ world, then water will be referring back to, the word water will be referring to XYZ. And then Earth in the actual world will be a counterexample. Yeah, because there, water, i.e. XYZ, would not be the stuff that was falling from the rivers and lakes and so on. Yes?
Sorry, when you say that we're evaluating that sentence of a different world from it is actual,
Yes.
and you're talking about the rivers and lakes, are you talking about the rivers and lakes on Earth or the local rivers and lakes on Earth?
This is just talking about the rivers and lakes in the actual world. So if the actual world is different. So So things that are 2 dimensions, you can switch along. You can switch around which world is actual, right? You could have many happy hours doing that. Yes? I mean, or you can keep a world fixed and talk about what's going on in other worlds. Keep the actual world fixed, talk about what's going on in other worlds. So, a priori means something like, is true in the actual world, no matter which world is actual. Flip it, but whichever world is actual, there are some worlds in which this is coming out false. And that's why it's not necessary. And anyway, that's one diagnosis of what's going on here. I hope I haven't got anything round the wrong way there. Okay, so but pause me if anything that didn't make absolute sense. So that's how there can be a priori contingent truths. Yeah, these are things that are true in the actual world, wherever world is actual, but whichever world is actual, there are always some worlds relative to which is coming out false. So it's contingent. Bingo. So water is the stuff that fills the rivers and lakes is a priori, but contingent, and water is H2O, is necessary, but a posteriori. Isn't that fantastic? Look at that. Okay. Anything else on that? You can get really spaced out in this stuff. Okay. I leave it as your homework exercise to get kind of spaced out in this. Right? Okay. Okay. So Putnam's original question was, is what's in your head fixing reference? Is what's in your mind fixing reference? And the basic argument here is, as someone said, suppose you go back to what was going on in earlier centuries when they didn't know that water is H2O, right, back to the 18th century. Then even back then, when they're talking about the water coming through the mill on Earth, they were talking about H2O. They were not talking about XYZ. Yeah? And similarly, on Twin Earth, when they had their water mills there, what they called the water mills there, then they didn't know that water was XYZ, but still, when they used the word water, they were referring to XYZ. Yeah? That's okay? So, what's going on is that in 1750, the people on Earth are using the word water to refer to H2O. People in Twin Earth are using the word water to refer to XYZ. So the words are referring to different things, even back then. And here is the main point, but they're in the very same psychological states, right? Their minds are in exactly the same condition. Because everything internal to them is just the same. If you and your twin had been being swapped back and forth, there wouldn't have been any difference in your internal psychological states. What's going on in the mind of you and your twin is just the same, but you are referring to different things. So what sets up the connect between the name and the object is not what's going on in your mind. Your psychological state doesn't fix the reference. If we switched you between Twin Earth and Earth, then the reference of your word water would change. If we packed you off to Twin Earth for a year or two and swapped out your double, then the reference of your term water would change. You'd now be talking about XYZ. Would there be any difference in your internal psychological state? No. So what is setting up the connect between the name and the referent can't be what's in your psychological state. Right? There must be something about your context that is doing it. So that's our bombshell for today, right? Because we began by agreeing that your psychological state is, or some of us agreed, that your psychological state is what sets up the connect between the sign and the object.
So the mind doesn't create meaning.
The mind doesn't, that'll be a fair way to put it. Yeah, the mind doesn't create meaning. A dramatic way to put it would be to say meaning is imposed from outside. Yeah. The mind gets meaning imposed on it rather than making meaning. Yep.
Couldn't you just kind of know this from the causal theory of languages to begin with? That like if you don't connect the word and the sign and fix the
Right, that's right. If you buy the causal theory of reference to begin with, then you're going to say, you would never have said in the first place that this connect between the sign and the object was set up by the psychological state. Yeah. That's right. But this is another way of thinking of this is you could frame this as an argument for the causal theory. Yeah. That what's different between Earth and twin Earth is what's in the other end of the causal chains. Yeah. There is some disentangling to do here, but yeah. But we'll do that on Wednesday. But there is one last thing here. Are you all comfortable now that psychological state does not fix reference? For the reason given, can you put your hand up if you're comfortable with that? Yeah. The thing is, if the references of your terms change, then presumably what you're thinking about changes, right? Yeah? So what you're thinking about on Earth and twin Earth must be different, because you're thinking about different objects. So we began by saying that your psychological state could just be the same, whether you're on Earth or on twin Earth. But if what you're thinking about is different, then your thoughts are different. So you're not in the same psychological state, whether you're on Earth or twin Earth. And on that bombshell, we'll pack it up for today and we'll resolve everything on Wednesday. Well, within reason. Right. Okay.